Final warning from Earth, the Galactic Empire is off limits. 6 months had passed since the first Varathian fleet was destroyed. In that time, Emperor Zalvorn had worked tirelessly to assemble his Grand Armada. 5,000 warships from 7 different empires now gathered at the edge of the galaxy, preparing for their assault on Earth. The Emperor stood on the bridge of his new command ship, the glorious Vengeance. It was twice the size of the previous flagship and carried weapons that could crack a planet's crust. Around him, his bridge crew worked with nervous efficiency. They all knew the stories of what happened to the First Fleet. But the Emperor had convinced them that numbers would win the day. All ships report ready. Your Majesty, the fleet coordinator said. Emperor Zalvorn smiled. Excellent. Today we avenge our fallen warriors. Today we show the galaxy that the Varathian collective bows to no one. Your Majesty, said a quiet voice. It was Jae Sung, the historian who had survived the first battle. He had been forced to accompany the Second Fleet. Please reconsider. The humans warned us again. They said there would be no survivors this time. Silence, Zalvorn snapped. Your cowardice nearly cost us our honor the first time. I will not hear it again. He turned to his navigator. Set course for Earth, maximum speed. Let's finish this. The Armada jumped into hyperspace. 5,000 ships traveling together created a massive distortion in space-time that could be detected across light years. Earth knew they were coming. On Earth, in the command center deep beneath the surface, Admiral Hee-jin stood before a wall of screens showing every ship in the approaching fleet. Her officers worked quietly around her, preparing for what was about to happen. Chancellor Minseo's face appeared on the main screen. Admiral, are you certain about this? Protocol Hellfire has never been tested at this scale. I'm certain it will work, Hee-jin replied. I'm just not certain we'll forgive ourselves afterward. We gave them every chance, Minseo said, but her voice was heavy with sorrow. We warned them twice. We let survivors go to tell the story. They chose to come anyway. I know, Chancellor. It doesn't make it any easier. Captain Tai Yang entered the command center. He looked older than he had 6 months ago. The weight of the previous battle had aged him. The Eternal Vigilance is ready, Admiral. The entire defense fleet is in position. You won't need to fire a shot, Captain, Hee-jin said quietly. Hellfire will handle everything. With respect, Admiral, I'd prefer to be there. My crew deserves to witness what happens. We all need to remember why we carry this burden. Hee-jin nodded. Very well. Take your position. In the facility on Mars, Dr. Sung-ho prepared the systems for Protocol Hellfire. Bora worked beside him, her hands shaking as she entered codes. Doctor, she said, are you sure we should do this? 5,000 ships. That's thousands and thousands of people. They were warned, Sung-ho said, but his voice was hollow. Twice they were warned. What else can we do? If we show weakness now, every empire in the galaxy will think they can attack us. But using Hellfire? Doctor, we're not talking about weapons platforms anymore. We're talking about turning our entire star system into a weapon. We're talking about manipulating the sun itself. Sung-ho stopped what he was doing and looked at her. I know exactly what we're talking about. I designed half of these systems. And I hate every second of this, he returned to his work. But we don't have a choice. They took away our choice when they decided to ignore our warnings. The Varathian Armada emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the solar system. 5,000 ships arranged in perfect military formations. The largest fleet ever assembled for a single battle. Emperor Zalvorn looked at the view screen showing Earth, that small blue planet so far away. Open a channel to Earth, let me speak to them. The channel opened and Ambassador Ji-woo's face appeared. She was back on Earth now, standing in the command center with Admiral Hee-jin. Emperor Zalvorn, Ji-woo said calmly, you have entered human space with a hostile fleet. This is your final chance. Turn around and leave. There doesn't have to be more death. Zalvorn laughed. Do you really think I traveled all this way to turn back? Do you think 5,000 ships will be as easy to destroy as 500? He leaned forward. Your tricks won't work this time, humans. We have studied your tactics. We have prepared countermeasures. We have brought enough ships to overwhelm any defense. Surrender now or be destroyed. Ji-woo closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, they were filled with tears. We begged you not to do this. We gave you every warning. The blood of your crews is on your hands, Emperor. Remember that. She closed the channel. Admiral Hee-jin took a deep breath. All stations prepare to execute Protocol Hellfire. Authorization code Hygiene Alpha 7739. Across the solar system, every human installation responded. The weapons platforms that had destroyed the first fleet were just the beginning. Now systems built into every planet, every moon, every station activated. They had been waiting for 800 years, maintained in secret, hoping they would never be needed. "Sir," Captain Taeyang's tactical officer said aboard the Eternal Vigilance, "I'm reading massive energy fluctuations throughout the system. Power levels are off the scale." "I know," Taeyang said quietly. "Watch carefully. You need to remember what happens next." "We all do." Emperor Zalvorn watched his sensors with confusion. "What are they doing?" "The readings don't make sense." Then the sun began to dim. At first it was subtle, a slight decrease in brightness. But within seconds, the dimming became obvious. The sun that had shone over Earth for billions of years was losing its light. "What's happening?" Zalvorn demanded. "What are they doing to their own star?" Jae Sung, watching the readings, understood before anyone else. "They're not attacking their star," he whispered in horror. "They're using it. Oh gods, they're using the sun itself as a weapon." Humanity had learned long ago that the most powerful weapon in any star system was the star itself. 800 years ago, they had developed the technology to tap into that power, to channel it, to direct it. Protocol Hellfire turned the entire solar system into one massive weapon platform, with the sun at its heart. Space itself began to warp around the Varathian fleet. The ships tried to move, tried to escape, but space-time had become thick, like trying to swim through mud. They were trapped. "Shields to maximum," Zalvorn screamed. "All ships full power to shields." It didn't matter. The attack lasted 90 seconds. Energy drawn directly from the sun, focused and amplified by thousands of installations across the system, was directed at the Varathian fleet. The ships didn't explode. They didn't burn. They simply ceased to exist, erased from reality as if they had never been there. 5,000 ships gone. In 90 seconds. When it was over, there was nothing. No debris, no wreckage, no escape pods, no survivors, just empty space where the fleet had been. In the command center on Earth, Admiral Hyejin stood in silence. Around her, officers sat at their stations, stunned by what they had just done. Some were crying. Others stared at their screens in shock. "May we be forgiven," Hyejin said quietly. Then she straightened her shoulders. "Prepare a broadcast. Send it to every corner of the galaxy. Everyone needs to hear this." Within minutes, Admiral Hyejin's face appeared on screens across known space. Billions of beings watched as she began to speak. "I am Admiral Hyejin of the Earth Defense Fleet. 6 months ago, the Varathian Collective attacked our space despite our warnings. We destroyed their fleet and let survivors escape to tell the story. We hoped the galaxy would learn. We hoped there would be no more bloodshed." Her expression hardened. "Today, Emperor Zalvorn led 5,000 ships into our space. We warned him. We begged him to turn back. He refused. He thought our earlier restraint was weakness. He thought our warnings were empty threats. He was wrong." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. 5,000 ships entered our space. 5,000 ships no longer exist. There are no survivors. There is no wreckage. They have been completely erased from existence. Her voice grew colder. "This is humanity's final warning. The solar system and all human territories are permanently off limits. Any ship, any fleet, any empire that crosses our borders will share this fate. We will not warn you again. We will not negotiate. We will not show mercy. We will simply erase you." She leaned forward, and every being watching could see the pain in her eyes. "We did not want this. We have isolated ourselves for 800 years specifically to avoid moments like this. We asked only to be left alone. But if you force us to defend ourselves, we will do so with absolute force. Stay away from Earth. Stay away from human space. This is not a negotiation. This is not a threat. It is a promise." The broadcast ended. Across the galaxy, the reaction was immediate. The Galactic Council convened within hours and formally established a 50-light-year exclusion zone around all human space. No ship was to approach those borders under any circumstances. The penalty for violation would be left to human discretion. Not a single empire protested. Not one species questioned the decision. Years passed. Then decades. The galaxy learned to live with the forbidden zone at its edge. Trade routes were adjusted to avoid it. Maps labeled it clearly. "Final warning from Earth. The Galactic Empire is off limits. The news spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Within 3 days, every major empire knew about the destruction of the Varathian fleet. The survivors told their stories, and those stories were terrifying. In the grand chambers of the Galactic Council, representatives from 200 species gathered for an emergency session. The Council was the closest thing the galaxy had to a unified government, though its power was mostly symbolic. Today, however, the chamber was filled with genuine concern. Corthine stood before them. He was one of the Varathian survivors, and his testimony was being broadcast to billions of beings across known space. His hands shook as he spoke. "They warned us," Corthane said, his voice barely above a whisper. "For 72 hours, they gave us time to leave. Commander Velthar thought they were bluffing. He thought their warning was the act of a weak species trying to appear strong." He paused, his eyes haunted. "We were wrong. So terribly wrong." He activated a holographic display. It showed sensor data from the battle. The Council representatives watched as 500 ships entered the solar system, and then watched as 450 of those ships simply vanished. 14 minutes, Corthane continued. That's how long it took them to destroy our fleet. We never even saw their main ships engage. They had weapons hidden throughout their system. Thousands of them, and when they fired... He stopped, unable to continue for a moment. The ships didn't explode. They didn't break apart. They just ceased to exist. One moment they were there, and the next moment nothing. Not even atoms remained. The council chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. The lead counselor, a being named Ralvex from a species known for their diplomatic skills, raised his hand for silence. "This testimony is disturbing," Ralvex said, "but we must understand the full situation. The humans were provoked. They gave a warning. The Varathians ignored that warning and fired first." He looked at Corthane. "Is this correct?" "Yes, Counselor. Everything the humans said was true. They warned us. We didn't listen." At the back of the chamber, Ambassador Jiwoo sat quietly. She had arrived at the council station alone, without guards or weapons. She wore simple clothes and carried herself with calm dignity. When Corthane finished his testimony, Ralvex gestured to her. "Ambassador Jiwoo of Earth, the council recognizes you. Please help us understand what happened." Jiwoo stood and walked to the center of the chamber. Every eye watched her. She was small compared to most of the species present, but her presence commanded attention. "For 800 years, Jiwoo began, her voice clear and steady. Humanity has asked one thing of the galaxy, to be left alone. We took no territory that others claimed. We threatened no one. We kept to ourselves. We wanted peace. Then why build such terrible weapons? Demanded a representative from the Kelvari Empire. Why create devices that can erase ships from existence? Because we know what we're capable of, Jiwoo replied. 800 years ago, our ancestors fought a war. A terrible war that we won completely. When it was over, when we saw what we had done, we made a choice. We decided to isolate ourselves. We decided to build defenses so strong that no one would ever make us fight again. We didn't want to conquer. We wanted to be left alone. But you could conquer, another representative said. With weapons like that, you could control the entire galaxy. Yes, Jiwoo agreed. We could? That's why we don't. That's why we stay isolated. We don't trust ourselves with that power. So we hide it away and pray we never have to use it. She looked around the chamber. The Varathians came to our home. They threatened our people. They demanded we surrender. We gave them a warning and time to leave. They chose to stay. They chose to attack. The blood is on their hands, not ours. Ralvex studied her carefully. What will Earth do now? Will you expand your territory? Will you demand concessions from the Varathian collective? No, Jiwoo said simply. We will do what we have always done. We will stay in our own space. We will maintain our borders. And we will defend ourselves if threatened. She paused. But make no mistake. This is not an invitation to test us again. We have shown what happens when our warnings are ignored. We hope the galaxy will learn from this. The session continued for hours. Some representatives argued that Earth should be forced to destroy their weapons. Others insisted that Earth had every right to defend themselves. In the end, the Council passed a resolution formally recognizing human territory and establishing a 50-light-year exclusion zone around it. But not everyone was satisfied with this outcome. In the heart of the Varathian collective, Emperor Zalvorn watched the council proceedings with growing rage. He was an old ruler, proud and stubborn. The destruction of his fleet was not just a military defeat. It was a humiliation. His advisors stood nervously around his throne. "We must respond," Zalvorn said, his voice cold. "We cannot allow this insult to stand." "Your Majesty," said one advisor carefully. "The humans have weapons far beyond our understanding. Perhaps we should what?" Zalvorn interrupted. "Accept defeat? Show weakness to the entire galaxy?" He stood from his throne. "No, we will strike back. But this time we will do it properly." "What do you mean, Your Majesty?" Commander Velthar underestimated them. He thought 500 ships would be enough. He was wrong. Zalvorn smiled coldly. "So we will gather more ships. Many more. We will call upon our allies. We will assemble a fleet so large that even the humans' weapons cannot stop it." His advisors exchanged worried glances. One of them spoke up. "Your Majesty, the humans let survivors escape specifically so they could tell this story. They wanted the galaxy to know what would happen if their borders were crossed. If we attack again, we will win," Zalvorn said firmly. "Their weapons may be powerful, but they must have limits. Nothing is invincible. We simply need enough ships to overwhelm those limits." In the weeks that followed, Emperor Zalvorn sent ambassadors to 6 other empires. He spoke of the threat that humanity posed. He argued that if Earth could destroy one fleet so easily, what would stop them from attacking others? He played on the fears and uncertainties of other rulers. Some refused to join him. They remembered Jiwu's words about humanity wanting only to be left alone. But others, proud empires that didn't like the idea of a species possessing such power, agreed to contribute ships. Slowly, secretly, a new fleet began to assemble. This time it would be 5,000 ships from 7 different empires. This time Emperor Zalvorn himself would lead them. On Earth, intelligence reports about the gathering fleet reached Admiral Hyojin's desk. She read them with a sinking feeling in her chest. She had hoped the first battle would be enough. She had hoped the galaxy would learn. She called a meeting with Chancellor Mincio and Captain Taeyang. "They're coming again," she said without preamble. "The Varathian Emperor is assembling a massive fleet. 5,000 ships," Mincio closed her eyes. "We gave them a warning. We let survivors go specifically to prevent this. Pride is more powerful than wisdom," Taeyang said quietly. "The Emperor can't accept the defeat. He thinks if he brings enough ships he can overwhelm us. Can he?" Mincio asked. Admiral Hyojin was silent for a moment. "Our weapons platforms could handle 5,000 ships, but it would take longer, and there would be no chance for survivors. We would have to destroy them all to protect ourselves." "Then we need to try again," Mincio said. "We need to warn them again before they arrive." Ambassador Jiwu was still at the council station when she received the message from Earth. She immediately requested another emergency session. This time, when she stood before the council, her expression was grave. "Emperor Zalvorn of the Varathian Collective is assembling a fleet of 5,000 ships," she announced. "He intends to attack Earth in retaliation for his first fleet's destruction. I am here to issue a final warning not just to the Varathians, but to all empires considering joining this attack." She activated a holographic display showing the gathering fleet. "Earth does not want war. We have made that clear. But if this fleet enters our space, we will defend ourselves. And this time there will be no survivors. We will not show mercy twice." Her voice was hard. "Any empire that contributes ships to this attack will be held responsible. Any species that supports this invasion will face consequences. This is not a threat. This is a promise. You cannot threaten the entire galaxy," said a representative who supported the Varathians. "We are not threatening the galaxy," Jiwu replied. "We are defending our home. There is a difference." She looked around the chamber. "For the last time, we are asking to be left alone. Please do not make us do this again." Her plea was broadcast across the galaxy. Many empires withdrew their support from Zalvorn's fleet, but the proud emperor refused to back down. He had already committed too much. He believed that even if the humans had powerful weapons, they couldn't possibly have enough to destroy 5,000 ships. He was about to learn how wrong he was. In his private chambers, Captain Taeyang received new orders. He read them 3 times, hoping he had misunderstood. But the words were clear. If the Varathian fleet attacked, Earth would unleash Protocol Hellfire, not just the weapons platforms, everything. "Final warning from Earth, the Galactic Empire is off limits." The last minute ticked away. On the bridge of the Eternal Vigilance, every eye watched the countdown display. When it reached 0, silence filled the command center. They waited to see what the Vorathians would do. They didn't have to wait long. At the edge of the solar system, Velthar stood from his command throne. Time's up. Advance the fleet. Battle formation. Let's show these primitives what real power looks like. The 500 Vorathian ships began to move forward. Their massive engines glowed as they accelerated toward the inner system, toward Mars, toward Earth. Captain Tae-young watched the sensor displays as the enemy fleet approached. His hands gripped the arms of his command chair. "They're really doing it," he said quietly. "After everything, they're still coming. Should we intercept them, sir?" his tactical officer asked. "No, not yet. Let them come closer. Let them think they're winning." On the Vorathian command ship, Velthar smiled. "See, they're not moving. They're frozen in fear. This will be easier than I thought." "Commander," his sensor officer said, "I'm detecting some unusual readings throughout the system. Energy signatures I don't recognize. Probably their power plants going into shutdown," Velthar said dismissively. "They're preparing to surrender." As the Vorathian fleet passed the orbit of Jupiter, Velthar decided to send a message. He wanted the humans to know their warning had meant nothing. "Attention, Earth Defense Fleet. Your 72 hours have passed. You had your chance to surrender peacefully. Now we will take what we want. Prepare to be boarded." No response came from the human ships. Velthar laughed. "Fire a warning shot? Destroy one of their cargo stations. Let them see we're serious." The weapons officer targeted an unmanned cargo platform orbiting Mars. It was a simple structure used for transferring supplies. No one was aboard. The Vorathian ship fired, and the platform exploded in a brilliant flash of light. "There," Velthar said with satisfaction. "Now they know we mean." Every screen on his ship suddenly changed. The image of Admiral He-jin appeared. Her face was calm, but her eyes were filled with something that made Velthar's blood run cold. It was pity. "Commander Velthar of the Vorathian Collective," she said, her voice carrying across every ship in his fleet. "You were warned. You had 72 hours to leave our space. You chose to stay. You chose to advance. You chose to fire on our territory." She paused. "May your gods forgive us, for we will not forgive ourselves for what comes next." The transmission ended. For a moment, nothing happened. Then space itself began to change. Throughout the solar system, objects that had been invisible suddenly became visible. Thousands of them. They had been hiding in the asteroid belt, in the rings of Saturn, in orbit around every planet. They were weapons platforms, each one the size of a small moon. They had been there the entire time, watching, waiting. "Commander," the sensor officer screamed. "I'm reading massive power spikes everywhere. There are weapons platforms all around us. They were hidden somehow, I don't understand." "Shields up!" Velthar shouted. "All ships, shields to maximum. Return fire!" But it was too late. Captain Tae-young gave the order he had hoped never to give. "Execute Phoenix Protocol." The weapons platforms fired. What happened next wasn't a battle. It was an execution. The weapons that humanity had built 800 years ago, the weapons they had promised never to use again, proved why that promise had been necessary. The Vorathian ships never had a chance. Their shields, which could withstand conventional weapons, were useless. The human weapons didn't just destroy the ships. They atomized them. They broke them down at the molecular level. One moment a Vorathian warship existed. The next moment there was nothing. Not even debris. The weapons platforms fired in perfect sequence. Each shot was precise, calculated, efficient. 200 Vorathian ships vanished in the first minute, another 100 in the second minute. On his command ship, Velthar watched in horror as his fleet was systematically destroyed. "Retreat!" he screamed. "All ships retreat. Emergency jump to hyperspace." "We can't, sir," his navigator replied, panic in his voice. "They're blocking our hyperspace engines somehow. We can't jump out." "Then run! Maximum speed. Get us out of this system." The surviving Vorathian ships broke formation and fled, but the human weapons followed them, tracking each ship with perfect accuracy. More ships vanished. Then more. Velthar's ship shook as a blast hit their shields. The shields held, but barely. Another blast would destroy them. He looked at his tactical display and saw that only 70 ships remained out of the 500 they had started with. Then suddenly, the firing stopped. The human weapons had them perfectly targeted. They could have finished the job. But they held their fire. Admiral Hyojin's face appeared on Velthar's screen again. "We are allowing 50 of your ships to leave. You will take this message back to your empire and to the galaxy. Tell them what you saw here. Tell them what happens when humanity's warnings are ignored. Tell them that the solar system is off limits. Tell them to never come here again." Velthar couldn't speak. He could only nod. "Go," Admiral Hyojin said, "and be grateful we showed you mercy." The hyperspace block was lifted. 50 Varathian ships, damaged and traumatized, jumped away from the solar system. 450 ships and all their crews were gone, erased from existence in 14 minutes. On the bridge of the Eternal Vigilance, Captain Tai Yang stood looking at the tactical display. The battle was over. Not a single Earth ship had fired a shot. The ancient weapons platforms had done all the work. "Sir," Daun said quietly. "We won." "Yes," Tai Yang replied. His voice was hollow. "We won. Then why do you look so sad?" Tai Yang turned to look at her. "Because winning like this isn't something to celebrate. We just killed thousands of people. They were following orders. They were doing what they thought was right, and we erased them from existence. But they threatened us," Daun protested. "They would have killed us if we hadn't acted." "I know," Tai Yang said. "That's what makes it so terrible. We had no choice. We gave them a warning. We gave them time. We did everything we could to avoid this, but in the end we still had to kill them." He looked back at the display, and that's something we'll have to live with. Throughout the solar system, the weapons platforms powered down and returned to their hiding places. The Earth Defense Fleet maintained their positions, making sure no other threats approached. But there was no celebration, no victory speeches. The crews of the human ships sat quietly at their stations thinking about what they had just done. In the facility beneath Mars, Dr. Sung Ho sat with his head in his hands. Bora stood beside him, not knowing what to say. "We built these weapons to protect ourselves," Sung Ho said, "but using them makes me feel like we're the monsters." "They didn't give us a choice," Bora said. "I know. That's what I keep telling myself. We warned them. We gave them every chance. But it doesn't change the fact that we just killed thousands of people in 14 minutes. He looked up at her. "And the worst part? It was easy. So terribly easy." On Earth, Chancellor Minseo stood at her window looking out at the city. Her assistant entered the room. "The battle is over, Chancellor. Minimal damage to our forces. The Varathian fleet has been neutralized." "How many did we let escape?" 50 ships, as you ordered." Minseo nodded. "Good. They need to tell the story. The galaxy needs to remember why we stay alone." She turned from the window. "Prepare a broadcast. I need to address the people." An hour later, Minseo appeared on every screen across human space. She looked tired but composed. "My fellow humans," she began. "Today we were forced to defend ourselves. The Varathian collective invaded our space despite our warnings. They destroyed one of our stations and threatened our colonies. We responded with force. The battle is over. We are safe." She paused, letting her words sink in. "But I want you all to understand something. What we did today is not something to celebrate. We killed thousands of beings. We used weapons that our ancestors hoped would never be used again. We won the battle, but victory comes with a cost." Her voice grew firmer. "We will continue to isolate ourselves from the galaxy. We will continue to defend our borders, and we will continue to give warnings to those who threaten us, because we know what we're capable of, and we pray that others will learn to respect our boundaries so we never have to do this again." The broadcast ended. Across the Varathian collective, the 50 surviving ships arrived at their homeworlds. The crews stumbled out, traumatized and broken. They told their stories of the battle that wasn't a battle, of weapons that atomized ships, of a defense that couldn't be overcome, of a species that had warned them, then proved why those warnings should have been heeded. Jae Sung, the historian, was among the survivors. He immediately began compiling his report, documenting everything he had found in the archives and everything he had witnessed. He titled it, "The Species That Must Not Be Provoked." He made sure copies were sent to every major empire in the galaxy. The warning had been delivered in blood. Now the galaxy would have to decide whether to listen. Final warning from Earth, the Galactic Empire is off limits. Jae Sung couldn't sleep. The historian paced in his small quarters aboard the Varathian command ship, his datapad clutched in his hands. The numbers on the screen glowed in the darkness. 48 hours remained until the deadline expired. 48 hours until they would advance into human territory. He had spent the last day digging deeper into the Empire's archives, and what he found terrified him. The files were old, so old that most of them were corrupted or locked behind security clearances he didn't have. But he had found enough pieces to understand that something terrible had happened 800 years. How the archives mentioned a quarantine zone. They mentioned the Scorched Worlds incident. They mentioned a species that had to be avoided at all costs. And all of these references pointed to one region of space, the region where Earth was located. Jae-sung had tried to access the detailed files, but they were sealed at the highest level of Imperial security. Even the Emperor himself would need special authorization to open them. Why would simple historical records be locked away like that? What was the Empire trying to hide? He made his decision. He had to warn Velthar, even if it meant being humiliated again. Jae-sung found the commander in the war room, studying tactical displays with his senior officers. They were planning the invasion, discussing which human colonies to hit first, how to break their morale quickly. "Commander Velthar," Jae-sung said, his voice shaking slightly, "I must speak with you." "It's urgent." Velthar didn't look up from the displays. "Historian, I'm busy. Whatever ancient dust you've been reading can wait." "It can't wait, sir. Please, you need to see this." The annoyance in Velthar's voice was clear. "Fine. You have 2 minutes." Jae-sung activated his datapad and projected the information into the air above the table. Fragments of old reports appeared, partial sentences, corrupted data streams. "These are from our Empire's archives from 800 years ago. They all reference this region of space. They mention a quarantine zone that was established here." "So?" Velthar said. "Quarantine zones are established all the time for dangerous wildlife or disease." "Not like this, sir. Look at the security classification. These files are locked at the highest level. I've been a historian for 30 years and I've never seen anything sealed this tightly." Jae-sung pulled up another fragment. "This entry mentions the species that must not be provoked. Another mentions total sector loss. Sir, something happened here 800 years ago. Something so terrible that the Empire tried to bury every record of it." One of the officers laughed. "You think these primitives scared our ancestors? Look at their technology. Look at their fleet. They're barely able to leave their own solar system." "That's what concerns me," Jae-sung insisted. "If they're so primitive, why did our ancestors feel the need to establish a quarantine zone? Why seal the records?" Velthar studied the historian for a moment. "You're letting fear cloud your judgment. Perhaps our ancestors encountered a plague or a natural disaster in this region. That would explain the quarantine and the sealed records. It has nothing to do with the humans, but sir, enough!" Velthar's voice was sharp. "We are the Varathian Collective. We have conquered 10,000 worlds. We will not be frightened away by corrupted data files and the paranoid theories of a nervous historian. Return to your quarters. That's an order." Jae-sung lowered his head and left the war room. As he walked through the corridors, he felt a deep sense of dread. Something was wrong. Every instinct he had developed over decades of studying history told him they were making a terrible mistake. On Earth, Chancellor Min Seo sat in her office overlooking the city of Seoul. It was night, but the city glowed with light. Millions of people going about their lives, unaware of the decision she was about to make. Admiral Hee-jin stood before her desk. 36 hours remain, Chancellor. The Varathian fleet shows no signs of leaving. Have they made any other communications? Min Seo asked. None. They're simply waiting for the deadline to pass. Min Seo closed her eyes. She was 70 years old and had hoped she would never have to make this choice. Every Earth Chancellor studied the history. They all knew what humanity was capable of. They all prayed they would never have to use that capability. Activate Protocol Exodus, she said quietly. Admiral Hee-jin's expression didn't change, but her voice was heavy. Are you certain, Chancellor? We gave them a warning. We always give them a warning. If they choose to ignore it, the responsibility is theirs, not ours. Min Seo opened her eyes and looked at the Admiral. But I want you to leave survivors. Enough to tell the story. The galaxy needs to remember why we stay isolated. Understood, Chancellor. Deep beneath the surface of Mars, in a facility that few people knew existed, Dr. Song-ho received the activation codes. His hands trembled as he entered them into the system. Around him, machines that had been dormant for 8 centuries began to wake up. The weapon platforms had been built by humanity's ancestors after the last Great War. That war had been the reason Earth isolated itself from the galaxy. The weapons were so powerful, so terrible, that humanity had decided never to use them again. They had hidden them throughout the solar system, maintaining them in secret, hoping they would rust away unused. But hope was not enough. "Doctor," Bora said from her console, "all platforms are responding. Power levels rising to operational status." Sung-Ho nodded. "Continue the activation sequence. I want everything ready when the deadline expires." "Sir, do you think they'll actually attack?" "Yes," Sung-Ho said. "I've studied the psychological profiles of Imperial species. They view warnings as signs of weakness. They can't imagine that a smaller force would willingly choose to be merciful. To them, our restraint looks like fear." "That's their mistake," Bora said quietly. "Yes," Sung-Ho agreed, "and it will be their last." Captain Tae Yang walked through the corridors of the Eternal Vigilance. His crew was preparing for combat, but they moved with calm efficiency. There was no panic, no fear. They had trained for this moment, even though they had hoped it would never come. He entered the ready room where his senior officers waited. Among them was Da-Un, the young pilot who would lead the fighter squadrons if combat began. "Status report," Tae Yang said. "All ships are at full readiness." His tactical officer reported. "The hidden platforms are coming online. Defensive grids are active. Enemy movements? The Varathian fleet remains at the system's edge. They're holding formation, waiting." Tae Yang nodded. "They think we're bluffing. They think our warning was empty pride." He looked at each of his officers. "I want you all to understand something. What we're about to do is not something to celebrate. We will win this fight. That's not in question. But winning doesn't make it right. Those ships out there are filled with living beings. They have families, dreams, fears. They're following orders from a commander who doesn't understand what he's facing." "Sir," Da-Un said, "if they're just following orders, shouldn't we show them mercy?" "We are showing them mercy," Tae Yang replied. "We gave them a warning. We gave them time to leave. That's more mercy than most of them would have given us." He paused. "But once they cross the line, once they fire the first shot, mercy becomes something different. Then we must act decisively to protect our people." 12 hours before the deadline, Jae-sung made one final attempt. He requested a private meeting with Velthar, using his authority as a senior historian. Surprisingly, the commander agreed. They met in Velthar's quarters. The commander was drinking, already celebrating the victory he assumed would come. "Speak quickly, historian. I'm in a good mood and I'll actually listen to you this time." Jae-sung pulled up his findings. "Commander, I found something else. In the oldest archives, there's a partial transmission from a fleet that entered this region 800 years ago. The message is corrupted, but I was able to recover fragments of it." He played the audio file. Static filled the air, but through it words could be heard. Screaming, panic, and then clearly. "They're everywhere. Shields are useless. Nothing can stop it. Retreat, retreat. Oh gods, the sun itself is..." Then silence. Velthar's expression had changed. For the first time, Jae-sung saw doubt in his commander's eyes. "That could be anything," Velthar said, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. "Commander, what if the humans are isolated not because they're weak, but because they're dangerous? What if they choose to stay away from the galaxy to protect us from themselves?" Velthar was quiet for a long moment. Then he straightened up. "No, we have 500 ships. We have the best weapons the Empire can build. Even if the humans have some secret defense, they can't possibly stand against our full might." He seemed to be convincing himself. "We advance as planned." Jae-sung left the quarters with a sinking feeling in his chest. He had tried. He had done everything he could. But arrogance was more powerful than evidence. The countdown continued. 24 hours. 12 hours. 6 hours. Throughout the solar system, human ships moved into position. The ancient weapons platforms powered up, their systems coming online after centuries of sleep. On Earth, people gathered in their homes, in their churches, in their public squares. They prayed for peace but prepared for war. 1 hour remained. Final warning from Earth. The Galactic Empire is off limits. The stars shimmered at the edge of the solar system as space itself tore open. One by one, massive ships emerged from the glowing portals. They were enormous, each one the size of a small city. Dark metal hulls reflected the distant sunlight as 500 warships took their positions in a perfect military formation. On the bridge of the lead vessel, Commander Velthar stood with his forearms crossed behind his back. His purple skin gleamed under the ship's lights and his three eyes focused on the blue planet displayed on the main screen. Earth. Such a small, insignificant world. He had conquered 47 species in his career. This would be number 48. Send the message, Velthar ordered. His voice carried the confidence of someone who had never known defeat. Light years away, in the orbit above Earth, Captain Tae Yang sat in his command chair aboard the flagship Eternal Vigilance. He was a tall man with tired eyes and gray streaks in his black hair. He had served in Earth's defense fleet for 30 years, and in all that time, they had never fired a single shot in anger. Earth kept to itself. That was the rule. That was how humanity survived. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission," said the communications officer. "It's from the unknown fleet at the system's edge." "Put it through," Tae Yang said calmly. The screen flickered and Velthar's face appeared. The alien commander smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. "I am Commander Velthar of the Vorathian Collective. We are the masters of 10,000 worlds. Your species has been chosen for absorption into our glorious empire." Tae Yang said nothing. He simply watched. Velthar continued. "You will surrender all of your territories. You will submit to imperial rule. You will provide 30% of your population to serve as workers across our empire. You have 72 hours to accept these terms. If you refuse, we will take what we want by force." He paused, his smile growing wider. "Do not bother resisting. We have crushed species far more advanced than yours. Your 200 ships are nothing compared to our might." The transmission ended. The bridge was silent. Tae Yang looked at his crew. They were all waiting for his response. He pressed a button on his chair. "Connect me to Earth Command." Within seconds, Admiral Hyejin's face appeared on his screen. She was an older woman with sharp features and eyes that had seen too much. "I watched the transmission," she said before Tae Yang could speak. "What do you recommend, Captain?" "We follow protocol," Tae Yang replied. "We give them the warning." Admiral Hyejin nodded slowly. "The Council has already approved it." "Send the response," Tae Yang turned to his communications officer. "Open a channel to the Vorathian fleet. Make sure every ship receives it." The officer worked quickly. "Channel open, sir." Tae Yang stood from his chair. He straightened his uniform and looked directly at the camera. His voice was calm and clear. "This is Captain Tae Yang of the Earth Defense Fleet. You have entered sovereign human territory without permission. You have threatened our people. You have 72 hours to leave our space. This is your only warning. If you do not leave, we will remove you. There will be no further communication." He gestured and the transmission ended. On the Vorathian command ship, Velthar stared at the screen in disbelief. Then he began to laugh. It started as a chuckle and grew into a roaring laugh that echoed through the bridge. His crew joined in, the sound filling the massive chamber. "Did you hear that?" Velthar gasped between laughs. "They warned us. These primitives actually warned us." He wiped tears from his eyes. What arrogance. What delusion. They have 200 ships and think they can threaten 500. He turned to his tactical officer. "How long until we reach their inner planets?" 73 hours at current speed, Commander." "Perfect. We'll let their deadline pass, then we'll advance. I want them to watch us come, knowing their warning meant nothing." Velthar settled back into his command throne. "Prepare the troops for planetary assault. Once we glass a few of their colonies, they'll beg to surrender." Back on Earth, Ambassador Jiwoo stood in the Grand Hall of the United Earth Government Building. She was a small woman with kind eyes, but her voice carried authority when she spoke. Around her, the representatives of Earth's colonies and nations gathered. "They won't leave," said one representative. "They never do. They think we're weak. Then they'll learn otherwise," Jiwoo replied quietly. "We gave them a chance. We always give them a chance." "How many chances have we given over the centuries?" another voice asked. "How many warnings that went unheeded?" "Too many," Jiwoo admitted. "But we must try. We must always try." In a secure facility deep beneath Earth's surface, Dr. Sung-ho walked through rows of massive machines that hummed with dormant power. These weapons had been built over 800 years ago and had been used only once. After that day, humanity had sworn to never use them again unless absolutely necessary. He placed his hand on one of the cold metal surfaces. "Please leave," he whispered, though he knew the Vorathians couldn't hear him. "Please just leave." His assistant, a young woman named Bo-Ra, approached him. "Dr. Earth Command is asking for status updates on all defense systems." They're ready, Sung-ho said. They're always ready. That's what makes this so terrible. We know what these weapons can do, and we pray we never have to use them again. The hours passed slowly. Across human space, people watched the news feeds. Everyone knew about the Varathian fleet. Everyone knew about the deadline. Parents held their children close. Soldiers checked their equipment. Scientists ran calculations they hoped would never be needed. On the Varathian command ship, Velthar celebrated with his officers. They drank exotic liquors and told stories of past conquests. The humans were not even a concern in their minds. They were just another weak species that would soon learn their place in the galaxy. "Commander," said a voice. It was Jae-sung, the fleet's chief historian. He was a thin creature with nervous movements. "Sir, I need to speak with you about something I found in the archives." Velthar waved him away. "Not now, historian. Can't you see we're celebrating?" "But sir, it's about the humans. There are old records, very old, that mention—" "The humans are nothing," Velthar interrupted. "Whatever you found is probably just legends or mistakes in the data. Now leave me. We have a war to prepare for." Jae-sung retreated, clutching his datapad. He had found something disturbing in the Empire's oldest files. References to a quarantine zone. Mentions of a species that had destroyed an entire sector of space. All the records pointed to this region, to the solar system, to Earth. But the files were corrupted, incomplete. He needed more time to piece together the truth. But time was something they didn't have. Captain Tae-yang stood on the observation deck of the Eternal Vigilance, looking out at the stars. Somewhere beyond his view, the Varathian fleet waited. In 72 hours they would advance. And then everything would change. He had hoped, like every captain before him, that he would never have to give the orders that were coming. But hope was not enough against arrogance. "Sir," said a voice behind him. It was his first officer, Da-un, a young woman with bright eyes full of questions. "Do you think they'll leave?" Tae-yang was quiet for a long moment. "No," he finally said. "They never do. They see our patience as weakness, our restraint as fear. They don't understand that we isolate ourselves not because we must, but because we choose to." "Why do we choose it?" Da-un asked. Tae-yang turned to look at her. "Because of what happens when we don't." The countdown had begun.